Welcome. Lower Blackrock Spire is the last stop on our dungeon leveling journey. After this, it's all endgame dungeons. Lower Blackrock is popular in the farming meta as the first half offers substantial XP per hour, the loot tables are very good, and if you have any interest in making the key to unlock the upper portion of Blackrock Spire, you'll be farming this anyway. So might as well stock up on all that sweet gold and experience now to help with the harder dungeons before moving on to those. Let's get started. The entrance area has 5 packs of mobs, all of which can be skipped by jumping off the top of the bridge here, but for XP, you plausibly could pull all of these if your group is capable. Since I'm pulling by myself, I opt to only take 2 groups at a time here. None of these mobs are particularly dangerous, so it's pretty much just your average everyday pull. Bring the melee mobs to the casters and cleave away. Ideally killing casters first, since they're the only mobs that can't be reliably kited when things get hairy. If you happen to be looking at chat in this clip, what we're actually talking about is finding the rare spawns in the instance. There are 2 rare spawns in this dungeon that are of particular interest to you as a paladin. The first is the Spirestone Battlelord, who drops the Blackrock Slicer, previously known as the Nicker, which is a weapon that has a 4.0 speed and a proc that puts a 25-second debuff on your target. It is very strong for Reckoning builds and Ret in general. Definitely worth farming out even though you are prot. It's just great to slap it on and go hit someone in the face with it. The second is Bannock, who drops a great set of gloves for you. These are way better than Lightforge and they're basically on par with your tier 1 gloves. Definitely get those. Now, if you have a priest in the group who knows how to hop between targets with mind vision, he actually can scout from the entrance to find these mobs ahead of time. But that being said, if you need XP, there's no reason not to take advantage of the orcs leading up to the ogre room before resetting, and you can just hard farm your way there and get close enough to use slash target yourself and check anyway. As for this clip here, there's nothing special going on except for the fact that if you look where that original consecrate was, it wasn't actually touching that mob who's in the far right there, but it was still hitting him. So keep in mind the consecrate does have a little extra room there. Now, this next pull coming up, I've tried a number of different ways, and I can safely say it, the best way is just to run face first into those mobs and take them all to the right side. But I'm going to show you one of the line of sight clips just to give you an idea of how it's just so much sloppier trying this line of sight method. Really not worth it. And this is a great example of, there's a lot of times where you're usually just better off face checking mobs than you are line of sighting, even though your natural inclination might be to just try and line of sight because, oh, well, you know, if they're in the corner, they're all clumped up. But if there's only one ranged mob in a pull, you can pretty much always just clump them up manually without having to try and do anything crazy. So let's do just that on the next pull. No reason to get fancy here. You might think, you know, if something goes crazy, you could aggro here, but really nothing to worry about. Just go right in, face check these guys and call it a day. As far as I can tell, the only actual ranged mobs in this instance are the trolls. So you don't even have to worry about, like, that orc wolf rider you would think is a ranged mob, but he's not. And now that we've cleared out that corner, we can safely do a line of sight pull here without having to worry about those particular mobs. I have tried jumping in on this pack with like bubble pulls and stuff before. Really don't recommend it. Just kill the 1 pack, come here, use the rock. Very easy, very clean, can't go wrong. And between the pull at the front of the instance and this pull, you can kind of see where this instance gets a lot of XP per hour, just in terms of how many mobs you can clump up whenever you need to. So just a neat little thing for this next pull coming up. I never knew this before, but you can line of sight on the bridge by using those little spikes right there. Thought that was really cool, so I just wanted to show you right here. Makes this pull 10 times easier. You know, back in the day, I used to run into that group and things would just get sloppy, and it's just so much better this way. So after we clear the next bridge, we have an opportunity for another cheeky AoE pull. You can go pretty much all the way back into that corner and pull the extras if you want to, but I like to keep it to just these like 3 packs and do a little cheeky pull on the corner here. Much easier, much safer, and I've never had any problems with this particular pull. And the reason I say that corner is because if you try and LOS on the corner near the bridge there, sometimes mobs will evade bug out, and if they don't evade, sometimes they'll take a straight line. Like they'll go 90-degree angle from one corner and then come back at a 45-degree angle into the corner that you're in. It's very sloppy. And this is pretty much the last pull before the ogre room. You could work that other corner group in yet again, but I pretty much always skip it. I just Maybe if I had someone else pulling, or, you know, did a cheeky pet pull, it might be worth the effort, but otherwise I don't see a point in bothering with it. As for the ogres, there's really nothing special going on with these particular mobs. The hallway is pretty milquetoast for the most part, just very straightforward. You can't get too crazy with it. You know, some of the mobs put up debuffs on you and stuff like that. You'll figure it out. And because there's not a whole lot of options for you there, that's pretty much why the XP portion of the dungeon is done after the orcs. You could keep going, you can grab the trolls, but you can't really AoE those. There's more orcs later on, but you would have to either jump to them and then like reset your way out or something. So it's easier just to kill the orcs at the front and just reset and come back. And the only reason I'm showing the Omok fight here is because it is a little bit interesting. He does a pretty gnarly threat drop, and he also comes with 2 adds. So you just got to plan ahead for that, and really just dealing with the threat drop is the #1 thing. In this case, we just have another paladin. Can't go wrong with that. Speaking of trolls, let me show you why AoEing them is kind of shitty. So first off, I actually messed this pull up. I wanted to get that back group there and the group on the right, but I aggroed the one on the table to my left because I just wasn't paying attention, and this was the first run that we did in this dungeon. I don't know if you noticed so far, but my shield has been changing and my group has been changing, and that's because all of these runs are just kind of nitpicked to find the best pulls for each situation rather than just showing you all these bad pulls. But in this case, this is a really bad pull. All these axe thrower mobs do a lot of damage. They knock you down. There's 2 mobs that CC in here, and pretty much everything does some annoying ability like chain lightning and all that kind of stuff. It's just a mess. You're looking at 2 groups at a time at most. Most groups probably will just pull 1 at a time because it's much safer. Either way, don't make the same mistake I did. As for the rest of the trolls, there's nothing too crazy going on aside from the hexes that you're going to have to deal with. But I do want to note that in this particular room, I never like to fight those mobs that are in the middle where they are. It's always nice to LOS them over here. It makes it a lot easier because there's at least 2 or 3 patrols running around. Things can get messy. If you aggro multiple groups, you're going to end up just like that previous clip. Let's move on to the firebrand orcs. And this might feel like kind of the halfway point in the instance, but it really isn't, because everything after this is significantly harder than what we've just done. In fact, this room is kind of a litmus test for what your group can handle. If you have trouble here, you might not be able to do the whole run just yet. I usually try and keep this room to 2 groups at a time. In this case, I also got a patrol with it, but it worked out okay. These mobs do hit pretty hard. You can see I have a Mortal Strike debuff up, which is very dangerous. You got to be careful with that. And yeah, a little fire, a little shadow damage. It's pretty hard for most groups, and we're having a bit of a rough go of it here. That's mainly because I pulled extra mobs than I anticipated, and then I also positioned poorly and didn't LOS sooner than I should have in order to make it easier. But hey, they can't all be winners. So after the orcs, you get to have fun with some spiders, and there's nothing too crazy there, so I'm not going to go into it. But then you have an optional boss, and I'm going to stress optional here because this fight is ridiculously hard. I do not recommend doing this boss, even at level 60 with gear. I mean, it's doable, but the effort reward ratio is pretty bad. I don't know anything that drops off this guy that makes him worth fighting. And right at the start of this fight, you immediately spawn into 3 mobs. All these mobs are pretty rough. They like to do, you know, enraging, and they have casting abilities, and it's just not fun. You can see they're even spawning pretty quickly. Now, maybe this is a DPS issue. If we had more damage, we could get through the waves quicker and actually get ahead of things, but it's just messy. And honestly, this is harder than like Ubers for me personally. You know, you compare this to like the Rend event. Like, Rend is a joke. So up to you if you want to bother. So trucking right along, there's about another hallway and a half that I'm not going to show you because you're going to get to see it for yourself. This pole up ahead, you'll know this pole once you get to it, because it's probably one of the harder poles in the instance that a lot of times, like, if you do it wrong, people are going to get knocked off the edge and stuff, and it's pretty funny. What I like to do right there, just kite them a bit, makes it a lot easier. In fact, it'd probably be easier if you had like a ranged DPS actually start the pole and you just stand there and wait for him. But every other way that I've tried this is just sloppier by a country mile. So for the last boss, like a lot of mobs in this game that just hate prot paladins, he has a knockup that will drop aggro. Very fun. There's a right place and a wrong place to stand. And normally I used to try and position myself so that I could be hitting one of those pillars at the top there. But on accident, I discovered that actually these flagpoles work really well. So you just saw it there in that accidental discovery, but let's take them back and do it on purpose this time and just snuggle ourselves right up into that flagpole. You're only going to get knocked up about an inch. Fantastic. Aside from all that, the fight is very straightforward. If you're trying to get the gems for the Ubers quest and you want to reserve one, this is definitely the first gem worth reserving, because just coming all the way here is kind of a pain, whereas the first 2 bosses you can usually farm very easily and worry about those later. Speaking of farming, just keep at it because you never know what you're going to find. And as always, have a good one.